Good morning. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Community Farm Alliance podcast. I'm your host for the Blackberry series. My name is Vaughn Barnes, and I have with me today Tiffany Bellfield Al-min of Ballew Estates out of Madison County. Tiffany, how did Ballew Estates get started?
Oh man. So for me, it started in 2017 as the business Ballew Estates LLC, but the creation of the farm itself, Lord, my great grandfather sharecropped on this land in the early 1900s, and he bought it lot by lot as he sharecropped all around the Concord area of Madison County, which is where we live. My grandmother was born in this area, grew up in her teenage years and her 20s on this land as well. And so when my great-grandfather, Asher Ballew, made this land downtown, it was listed as Ballew Estates. And so when I got it as the third generational heir, when I picked up that documentation, it read Ballew Estates. So that's where the name comes from.
So now, I've heard of Actress Ballew before in a different episode. Can you tell everybody a little bit about that relation to that other episode and what's going on in your property?
Well, I would have to assume that it was my cousin Jim Embry. So Actress Ballew is my grandmother's father. He is my great-grandfather. And so the land that myself and my elder cousin Jim Embry steward, it all was Actress Ballew's at one time.
Crazy. So when you guys got back to the property, who was at the property first? Was it him? Was it you? Who was there?
No, so when my grandmother, the little white house that Jim lives in, that's the house that I was raised in. That's the house that I took my first steps, said my first words, walked to school every day from. Jim was doing all the great advocacy work all over the place, living in different states and in different places. For me, this was always home. And so I lived here my whole life, and my grandparents stewarded it when there was other family that wasn't here to steward it. The property has always been a space for family reunions, funeral repasses, a place that many of our family in the community and in the bordering states would come here to be more close to the ancestral land. So when you think about who's been out here, we've all been out here, but I never left. I've been here stewarding the land, growing, learning, helping my grandparents with the house, and all of those things. That's literally been my life's work. So whenever my grandparents were aging, and my Aunt Fry, who owns the land that Jim lived on, she moved away. Cousin Jim came down to help the elders as he has done over the years for different elders. And so he was here on site to help my grandparents with things, mow the yard. I'm in college at that time. But when my grandparents definitely got into elder, like in their 70s, 80s, I started to pop back up here. My mom moved back out here when my grandfather died. And then my grandmother died. My grandmother let me know, like, everything is set for you to take care and take over. And so, and that's what I did. Whenever she passed, I moved right back out here and continued to steward the land and, create a business to keep the land important and relevant in Madison County.
So besides yourself and Jim, are there any other relatives out there that are still doing some type of agriculture or farm work?
No, no, at the beginning there was 5 lots. And so I have one of those lots that's 4 acres. It's me and my mother own it, but my mother's a city girl. She come out here and mow the yard, but I'm the one that gets down and dirty and gets innovative. And then cousin Jim was living on the land that was my Aunt Fry's. My Aunt Fry sold it to the other family members. So there's one set that has 2. And then we have another family member that lives not nowhere near in the state, and they have this land as well. when you come out here and you see that it's cut and you see that there's things growing, that work is, championed by myself and cousin Jim. Cousin Jim's son, Obiora, definitely helped me start the stewarding process here on the land on my side. But outside of that, that's it. Of course, my family, my husband, Wally, and my wife, Ashley, and my kid, Michaela, we all get out in here and get dirty with the land for sure.
How do you update and upkeep all of those different functioning things that were there for, years, decades?
Well, you know what? So the White House that lives next to us, that cousin Jim lives in, that house has been, I literally remember it being remodeled when I was like 4 years old, updating the plumbing, hot water heater, things of that nature. And it's always been some renovations happening, but that house is not necessarily the original house, but the infrastructure of it is original. And because it's literally only been between, my grandmother, my aunt, Jim, outside of the original builders of the house, which were my great uncle and my great grandfather, no one else has really been in it. It's not been like wore down. It's really amazing to see how much is still the same as when I was little. If you walk over there right now, the home that I live in, which I call the big house, my grandmother and grandfather built it when I was about 7, 8 years old. And it is definitely aging. But I've been blessed to have a construction husband that helps me keep it together. But outside of that, the ponds and the naturescapes, the places that have been around since before probably my great grandfather was a sharecropper, we steward that. I know I use that word a lot, but I mean, stewarding is just the act of leaving things the way they are and making sure that they are maintained and supported. And so that's what we do. We grow things and put things on the land, and working with community to keep things as natural and as primitive as they were when I was a child.
Where I live at, they're always developing.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about any of the things that have slightly changed since you guys acquired the farm? Or is there anything that you did differently, like added chickens or the different plants? Like, talk a little bit into that.
So, so on the things that haven't changed, is the elderberry and the natural pollinators that are native to the land that we just leave alone, right? But when you talk about development down the road, we have the Army Depot and all of the fly-in and things above us that used to not be. We had our pond turnover one year where we're looking for the fish and there's like no water, and there's just water underneath of us, but it's like it was being sucked out. Then we had NRCS come out and they told us basically with some water quality testing that it had turned over. And this comes from the overgrowth of trees, or, there's been some non-invasives taking out invasive plants. And then, of course, the new pollution in our air literally was sitting on our pond and was sucking the oxygen out. And then all our fish died and it turned over is what it's called. We have also had to deal with, I used to be able to wake up and see deer and possums and all types of wildlife out in the field. And, for a very long time, we did not see that. And that's because we're getting developed around here too. So, it took time for us to realize that we have to leave stuff alone to get it back to the way it was. I was raised in an agriculture mindset, like tobacco farming. Tobacco farming was something that we did. And so, my grandfather used, pesticides and fertilizer and all of that stuff. And I realized at that time there was a balance of nature and human, right? And I realize now that I can't do all of those things and think that I'm going to bring wildlife back to me. So I really had to go back to a primitive permaculture, sustainable agriculture methodology of growing things. You had mentioned earlier about the chickens. I got chickens to begin composting. and regenerate the soil around me. The more that I do this, the more that I'm regenerating the wildlife out here, we are seeing. Now, not that I want a whole lot of deers over here trying to bite off my crops and stuff. I grow as homestead, right? So it's not like a big acre of things that they can destroy, but, there's problems with that, but not seeing is just as bad as seeing. Army Depot has a fence of wildlife, and all the wildlife sticks over there. And there used to be a time where there was no fence and everything moved around. They would eat here, they migrate, move somewhere else out Concord, and you would see them moving in their packs. And I'm talking about deer specifically. And so I just know that, like, I don't want the cute cut yard. We have flowers and things growing. The pollinators was another thing. Deer I just think of because I remember waking up and seeing them outside, and then one day they just weren't there. But we've had a lot of development of houses and townhouses and things around us, and the Army Depot. But like with pollinators, I had stopped seeing monarchs a lot. And cousin Jim and I both talked about, like, we remember coming out to the country and there was just bees and butterflies and wasps and everything. What's the problem? And it's because we've been cutting our yards and everybody else is cutting their yards. And we're literally losing the population of pollinators.
Did you know that CFA is a nonprofit organization that supports family farms, equity work, food access, and policy work across Kentucky? If you're interested in supporting any of this work, please go to cfaky.org and go to our Donate tab in order to donate or become a member today. We really appreciate any and all help that we get, and it goes back to helping both farmers and consumers across the Bluegrass State. For more information, go to www.cfaky.org. Once again, that's www.cfaky.org. Thank you. And now back to our show.
During the break, you had mentioned some stuff about what's going on with the farm now. Let's tell the viewers and listeners what Ballew Estates is doing.
Man, what is Ballew Estates not doing is sometimes how I feel. So when we first started, of course, I wanted services. I wanted to do things. I wanted to connect community back to the land as I felt detached from it. And so that went into having like colleges, universities, ag groups, student groups, just people who are like, hey, I've heard about your family throughout history. Can we just come and see the land? And what does that look like is folks coming out here doing a tour of the land. We have spaces on our land where my great-grandfather and grandmother were baptized in the ponds here. My mother was baptized in the ponds here before we had baptism pools inside of our churches. And that is something to be talked about. People love to hear about, again, the primitive ways of how I was raised and how we still do some of the practices that were done back way before me and my mother were even thought of. So that's something that continues. A lot of times we take Ballew Estates and what we do with permaculture and, agriculture and just us being stewards of the land. And I find myself in cities and communities who need a representation of a Black farmer. It's not a lot of us here in the state. And so I've been in like Lexington, Louisville, Bowling Green, Ohio, Virginia, just going and talking about the legacy of Ballews here in Madison County. And that's been beautiful. And that really was what was our, to do all, which is just talking about the land. Then it got into the fact of the pollinator conservation. So cousin Jim has spoken before about, how we brought pollinators to the land. He has one way of doing it, and I have another way of doing it.
With all of that stuff going on with pollinated gardens, does NRCS help with that process?
Yes. Actually, yes. We work with NRCS. They've done, helped us with our large spread of pollinators in our backfield that we leave pretty much alone. We both, myself and Jim, received equipped high tunnels to help start plants, plant plants, or anything of that nature. And we're constantly in a constant conversation with NRCS if we needed anything else. We've had forestry come out. They identified, our non-invasives and, told us methods to remove, like, our Johnson grass is, they've given us, so yes, it's been definitely helpful. It's probably the only agency that we work with frequently is NRCS.
Now, of the other agencies out there, have y'all experienced racism?
I would say bias more than racism. Madison County is not as small as some of the other counties in Kentucky, but it definitely is relationship based. I think that we get saved by being Ballews, but there are so many different Ballews here in the state and we're in the county that they try to group us all together, and I'm just like, I'm not with those Ballews. But we are the same Ballews, but it's not the same. I think that at the beginning, there was no real relationships, and so we asked for things. We did applications. Things would get, the time. There was no explanation of why we're waiting, having to call people in state offices to help us. We definitely had our time. But once it was addressed, once it was, validated, and once we start to build the relationships, the conversations have definitely gotten easier over the years. So, we've been adding different practices onto the farm, going to conferences, being, wearing my logo, speaking of my story. And so we've had more groups come out, and more, representation of resources. And I've been blessed to receive, assistance from folks that at the beginning, 7-8 years ago, I was just blind. Now I know what to ask, who to ask. And then if I don't get the right answers, I now know who to go to advocate for me. And it's definitely grown. The relationships and the resources have grown throughout the years.
So speaking of advocacy, what other work do you do?
So outside of advocating for pollinators on my land and advocating for women and communities to ground themselves back in the land and reestablish the relationship with the land, I'm also work for Community Farm Alliance. I am the food systems equity organizer, part of the farm to table team. So I definitely advocate for BIPOC farmers here in the state. I'm also a full spectrum master doula, been a doula for 17 years, going to midwifery school next year. So I advocate for women in the Appalachia, East Kentucky, BIPOC, and especially our young mothers who don't know what to ask. And that's the point of advocacy, right? I stick my neck on the line to ask the difficult questions and build the difficult relationships so other people like me don't have to feel so vulnerable, and then can be transparent in those conversations.
I recently seen you at the Women's Circle, and it was an amazing time. There was so much learning going on. What's your role in those types of situations?
So I was blessed to get connected with Nicole from American Farmland Trust, and the work that myself and Letitia Marshall are already doing to represent and advocate different sectors of agriculture. She is a Black woman in urban ag. I'm a Black woman, rural Appalachian. And we also realize that some of the organizations and the communities we come from don't really see women of color leading the work. And so the Women of the Land learning circles are intentionally to have women lead it, prioritizing women of color, and then having women of color farmers host these wonderful circles. But the difference is that it's not meaty on education as far as institutional education. It is a land-based learning circle where we intentionally gather in a circle and share energy and stories to really be vulnerable, to have those difficult conversations of what we are triumphing, what does a success look like, whose resources are whose and how we can come together and continue to do this work and build our local food system.
Farmers Market Support Program Services. Did you know that a program like this exists in the state of Kentucky? If your market has been around for a while, or maybe you are a new and existing market, we offer marketing development. We also offer business development. We want to offer programs as such like capital support to support your market managers. There's a cost share program. We can establish your market with the SNAP EBT program. And lastly, we provide networking. For more information, please contact us at cfaky.org/FMSP. Again, that is cfaky.org/FMSP.
Tiffany, tell us more about this women's retreat and what went on there and the plan for all the women's retreats and women's circles.
So Women's Circle is very ag-based. Women's Retreat is a spiritual rejuvenation of soul, spirit, mind, body, okay? It is something that is much larger. It's my 8th year this year, and we have people come over from all over the United States, and this year maybe all over the world. And it's a space for women entrepreneur. It's a space for BIPOC leadership. It's a space, I call it the halftime mark. It's always the full moon of June. If the full moon's at the beginning, it's at the beginning. This year, it's June 2nd through 4th. Sometimes it's almost like coming in right before 4th of July. It's whenever the full moon is. But it's a beautiful space. And it's actually grown. It used to be just a few of my friends, then my friends' friends, then community. Then it's just took off, right? To witness it is to believe it. Me to explain it does not even touch what goes on out here. But for the future of Ballew Estates, I plan to continue to have these women's retreats. But I'm also a doula. So I'm starting to get more of my doulas and my clients and my postpartum moms using the women's retreat as their time out as well. And I'm hoping, and the wish is as we got a RAFI grant, one of 11 in the United States. I received one this quarter, and we're putting in a commercial manufacturing kitchen downstairs. And everything has a point, right? So Women's Retreat just has definitely boosted my women clientele and experiences for the doula midwifery work I do. Also here on the farm, we labor women down. I birthed inside this house and on this land. Women come out here to get their minds together prenatal before they actually go into the hospital. And so my goal is to eventually turn our house into a space where it's a labor house, it's a birth house, it's a postpartum house, it's a safe house for women. And expanding onto my land, maybe tiny homes, and expanding the chicken coops and having a on-farm land experience for women and their families. As we never stop laboring. I got a 17-year-old and I feel like I just had it yesterday. So that's a huge future for us, to teach for long-term stays here at the farm.
Now speak about the 17-year-old that you have, because I've seen so many pictures of what looks like a twin of yours. I'm like, man, Tiffany got a twin? No, this is your 17-year-old and she goes with you almost everywhere. Talk about this this time that what was the picture in DC?
It was
talk about that.
So my daughter, I've homeschooled my daughter since she was in 7th grade. This is her senior year, and the best way to teach my daughter is through life experiences. I want her to be prepared and really know who she is. And you're right, she's been with me. She's helped me plan the Kentucky Black Farmers Conference. She's been with me at the Eastern Kentucky Farmers Conference. We've been everywhere between Jackson and Corbin, and everywhere is Bowling Green and Mullinsburg, right? She goes everywhere with me. She likes to get her hands dirty. She's completely taken over the chickens. She's researched and made a whole schedule on when we turn the eggs. She marks the eggs that the hens lay in, and she is my mini-me. She's my right hand. Like, she's there. She labors with me. She does birthing with me. She graduated doula. She is now a certified doula. She's pretty amazing. Like, I love this kid. Like, she is definitely my twin. And everybody knows who she is when she comes around. Like, she's there to work, be a hand. And the goal is to leave this work to her. With her own want, her own will, I don't force Kayla to go places with me. Kayla's like, oh, that's where we going? Okay, I'm trying to go. We going to Susan Miller's? Okay, I'm trying to pick some strawberries. Like, that's just in her nature. And I hope that sticks with her. I really do.
I think I remember, did she go down to Bowling Green to Need More Acres?
Yes.
What role does she have there?
So when she came down there with me, her and Michelle's daughter, Elizabeth, they're really similar. They're both homeschooled. They both know how it is to run the business. And so, she was our hands. Like, myself and my partner were downstairs, cooking food, and I'm also speaking, and we're also coordinating. And I literally tell Kayla to do it, and she did it. She talked, build relationships. She helped us roll up the egg rolls. She has her, food handler's permit as well. And so she's down there helping us cook, helping make sure that everything is neat. A lot of times I couldn't even come upstairs. So she was literally running up and down the stairs, and I know you had mentioned DC, because DC was a big thing too. Bowling Green was big. And so was DC. Kayla's there to observe and to absorb. But as you've seen her in that house, it was like, okay, we making the banners. Let's make the banners. We making the posters. Let's make the posters. What y'all need? You want me to cook? Y'all hungry? Like, that's just the way she is. And when it was time to march, there was no question about it. Kayla was in front of me with that board held up high. Like, I'm a Kentucky Black farmer, and I'm here, and I exist. And it was such a proud moment. She definitely owns the businesses that we've created, and she definitely understands that she's next in line for all of that.
That's amazing. That is amazing. We need to find ways to get more Kaylas out there, and even encourage more parents like yourself to do what it is that you're doing that helps groom the next generation of Kentucky Black farmers. Now, this is the Blackberry series. Tiffany, what berry best represents Ballew Estates?
Now, you already know I'm going to pick the elderberry. You know why? Elderberry, just like Ballew Estates, has been around since the beginning of Black agriculture, since the beginning of time, since the beginning when the natives were here on the land and had their spiritual mounds in the backyard, and was definitely creating all that we live of today, okay? The original organics, okay? That's who we are, the elderberry, and it's here to heal and remind you of how connected we are to the land, and they are the most resilient plant that I have out here on the land. So,
elderberry it is. You just went straight for it.
Yeah.
You know what? Last season, not so many people named. Like, I've been thinking about so many different other berries that people don't name, but elderberry, especially for this region, and I also get it. Like, even with just your farm, and that's dope. What do y'all do with the elderberry? Like, do y'all make syrup, tincture? What do y'all do?
I use the elderberry and dry it out. It goes into my immunity. I use it for some of my healing tinctures. And I also make syrup. And my syrup it's when they want it, they want it. Okay. The elderberry syrup is just, I even make bundles. Like, you know what? Just get the tea and the syrup, and I promise you'll be good during the cold and flu season. But that's what we do. Elderberry syrup.
Any final words that you would give to anybody that wants to get into agriculture?
Don't listen to everybody. Everybody has their own experience. Everybody has their own rendition of what is a large scale, small scale homesteader, the difference between grower and farmer. And if you listen to everybody, you're going to get lost in translation. If you have a passion and you got a piece of land and you know how you want to grow for your family or for your community, just do it. If you're going to lean on somebody, ask for advice on how to do that well. But don't listen to folks who try to tell you that you can't, because you can. I have city farmers who literally grow in buckets in their back patio and definitely have enough to make enough value-added products to feed their family. And also, if you need help, I'm here. I've been doing this for a while. It's my life's work. And so I would love to help anybody grow. Yep, for sure. Don't be scared.
And just like that, we are done. Another great episode, Community Farm Alliance. And as I always say, real change comes from the ground up. Until next time, listeners. Peace.